On December 23, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 270 people. It's widely believed this single disaster brought down the airline. But that belief is only half the story. The truth is that Pan Am's decline began decades earlier, rooted in a series of strategic miscalculations. By the time the bomb went off, the airline was already hemorrhaging money and passengers. So how did the world's most glamorous airline, a symbol of American power, end up bankrupt? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, to a time when Pan Am ruled the skies. The answer begins in 1927, when a young entrepreneur named Juan Tripa founded Pan American Airways with a single mail contract. From the start, Tripa dreamed of something bigger, a global network that would shrink the world. Within a decade, Tripa's gamble paid off. Pan Am launched the first scheduled transatlantic flight in 1939, turning luxury air travel from a fantasy into reality. By the 1960s, the airline flew to 86 countries, its blue globe logo a symbol of American prestige. But success bred ambition. In 1966, Tripa placed an order for 25 Boeing 747s, a $525 million bet that was, as the Smithsonian puts it, a bet the company move. The jumbo jet would revolutionize air travel, but it came at a staggering cost. And that was the problem. Pan Am had bet everything on a future that demanded constant growth. When the 747s arrived, they flew half empty. The airline needed more passengers, more routes, but the golden age was already starting to crack. Why did Tripp bet the company on the 747? Because he believed the future of air travel was mass luxury. The jumbo jet could carry twice as many passengers, slashing costs per seat. If it worked, Pan Am would dominate the skies for decades. The 747 could carry twice as many passengers as any existing jet, slashing costs per seat. If it worked, Pan Am would dominate the skies for decades. And it did work, initially. The 747 became an icon, and Pan Am's fleet grew to 150 aircraft. But the cost of expansion left the company dangerously exposed. When oil prices quadrupled in 1973, that exposure became a crisis. Jet fuel prices skyrocketed, and Pan Am's fuel bill jumped from $300 million to over $1 billion in just 2 years. Jet fuel prices quadrupled almost overnight, and Pan Am, with its massive fleet of thirsty 747s, saw its fuel bill skyrocket from $300 million to over $1 billion in just 2 years. So why didn't Pan Am recover when oil prices stabilized? Because in 1978, the US government passed the Airline Deregulation Act, stripping away the route protections that had been Pan Am's lifeblood for 50 years. Now any airline could fly internationally, and Pan Am's domestic network was too small to feed its global routes. Competitors like Delta and American, with strong domestic hubs, began stealing Pan Am's passengers. Pan Am's protected advantages evaporated. The airline that once carried a quarter of all transatlantic passengers now held just 8%. It was a losing battle, and Pan Am's leadership was about to make a desperate gamble to reverse its fortunes. But here's the catch. Pan Am had no domestic network. It flew to London, Tokyo, and Rio, but not to Chicago or Dallas. That meant passengers had to use other airlines to reach its international hub, a costly inefficiency that put Pan Am at a disadvantage. So in 1980, Pan Am bought National Airlines for $400 million. The idea was to gain domestic routes to feed its international flights. But National's routes overlapped with Pan Am's existing ones, and the price tag was staggering, adding $400 million in debt. The merger added $400 million in debt, but failed to solve the core problem. National's routes didn't connect well with Pan Am's international system. The airline was now saddled with debt and still lacked a true domestic feeder network. So why did Lockerbie finish Pan Am when it had survived oil shocks and deregulation? The answer lies not in the bomb itself, but in what it exposed. A company already bleeding out, its reputation its last remaining asset. On December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all 259 on board and 11 people on the ground. The FBI called it a catastrophe that Pan Am never recovered from. Bookings plummeted overnight. But the bombing was the final straw, not the cause. Pan Am had already lost its protected routes, its market share had fallen from 25% to 8%, and it was drowning in debt. The bomb didn't kill Pan Am, it just silenced the last cry for help. By 1990, Pan Am's market share had shrunk to a sliver. In January 1991, the airline filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, drowning in $2.5 billion in debt. It was the end of an empire. Delta Airlines swooped in, buying Pan Am's European routes and assets for $1. $3 billion, but the sale was a fire sale. Pan Am's iconic brand was now just a memory. On December 4, 1991, Pan Am's last flight landed in Miami. The airline that once connected 86 countries was gone. Its decline is a textbook case of a company that failed to adapt. But before the 747, Pan Am pioneered the jet age. In 1958, it launched the first transatlantic jet service with the Boeing 707, cutting flight time from 14 hours to 7. This cemented Pan Am as the leader in innovation. Pan Am didn't just fly planes, it sold a lifestyle. First-class passengers enjoyed gourmet meals, fine wines, and even piano bars. The airline's slogan was, "The world's most experienced airline," and it lived up to that promise. During the Cold War, Pan Am became a symbol of freedom. It was the only airline allowed to fly into West Berlin, and its flights were a lifeline for the city. This political role boosted its prestige, but also tied it to government interests. In the 1970s, Pan Am ordered Concorde, the supersonic jet. But the aircraft was noisy, fuel-hungry, and expensive. Pan Am eventually cancelled the order, but the episode showed its willingness to chase risky technology. The 1973 oil crisis was devastating. Pan Am's fuel costs soared, and the airline posted its first loss in 1974. To survive, it sold assets and cut routes, but the damage was done. The era of cheap fuel was over. Deregulation in 1978 allowed any airline to fly anywhere. Pan Am, which had relied on government-protected international routes, suddenly faced competition from Delta, American, and United on its most profitable routes. Without a strong domestic network, Pan Am couldn't feed passengers to its international flights. Competitors like Delta had hubs in Atlanta and Dallas, funneling travelers worldwide. Pan Am's hub was New York, but it lacked connecting flights. In 1980, Pan Am bought National Airlines for $400 million to gain domestic routes. But the integration was messy. Different fleets, labor unions, and cultures clashed. The merger added debt without delivering the expected synergies. Desperate for cash, Pan Am sold its prized Pacific routes to United Airlines in 1985 for $750 million. This included routes to Japan, Hong Kong, and Australia. It was a short-term fix that sacrificed long-term growth. By 1991, Pan Am was a shadow of its former self. It sold its European routes to Delta and its Latin American routes to American. On December 4, 1991, the last flight landed in Miami. The empire was gone. But what made Pan Am's domestic void so damaging was the rise of the hub-and-spoke model. Airlines like Delta funneled passengers through central hubs, maximizing efficiency. Pan Am, with its point-to-point international routes, couldn't compete. It was a dinosaur in a new era. So Pan Am's debt kept growing. By 1985, it owed $2 billion. To service that debt, it sold assets, its Pacific routes, its headquarters, even its planes. Each sale brought temporary relief, but weakened the airline further. It was a death spiral, not a single blow. And as Pan Am sold routes, its brand faded. The blue globe that once symbolized global reach now appeared on fewer and fewer planes. Passengers lost trust. Why book a flight on an airline that might not exist tomorrow? The brand, once its greatest asset, became a liability. Which brings us back to Lockerbie. The bombing was the final straw, not the root cause. Pan Am was already a patient in critical condition. The bomb just unplugged the ventilator. The real story of Pan Am's fall is one of slow decline, not sudden disaster. So the myth that Lockerbie alone killed Pan Am is just that, a myth. The real culprit was a series of strategic failures. Overexpansion, debt, and an inability to adapt. Pan Am didn't just fall from the sky, it was slowly dismantled by its own decisions.